Okay, what is it? YouTube HPJ here, and it is time to talk Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, we are revving up to start our next journey into the Project Harpie videos, and we are now entering the 5Ds era. We are now exiting GX, leaving it off of Light of Destruction, which introduced Dark Arm Dragon into the fray. Now, the reason why I bring up Dark Arm Dragon is because of a particular card that was released during the 5Ds era, mostly during Edison. And don't worry, I will talk about this monster because this monster will be included in this. But there are a couple of key points that I want to bring up before we go any deeper into the actual video. Because from this point on, after the release of Harpie Queen in Force of the Breaker, going into Storm of Ragnarok, there were no other legitimate Harpie cards released in. So a period of 4 years, there were no other legitimate Harpie cards released. There was tons of Winged Beast support, only because of the two major Winged Beast archetypes that were released during then. And even then, so they did not really need the support of Harpies, because what was Harpies really bringing to them, except for back row removal. And even at that point, it was very much scarce of back row removal. So how did Harpie players deal with a lot of things during then? Well, let's see. The meta shifted to be pure variants of dark attributed decks, focusing on zombies or the occasional pitch black setup, which was focusing on Dark Arm Dragon, who was newly released and became Dark's pivoted boss monster at that period of time. Having exactly 3 dark monsters in your graveyard, manipulating your graveyard to have those 3 darks, and then filling the graveyard with more darks so that Dark Arm Dragon would have more material to pop things. Even coined himself as Dad because of his initials, DAD. Dark Arm Dragon being a dark counterpart to that of the Arm Dragon series, more specifically Arm Dragon level 7, and basically just became a period of a monster that was relegated to Yu-Gi-Oh! History as probably one of the biggest changes to its game state off of just one single card. Because it was crazy how crazy Dark got during the end of the GX era going into 5Ds, and how long of a thing it was. Because Twilight, for what the decks ended up becoming, were basically just feeding off of the mill engine that became Light Swarm, the subsequential setups of Dark Monsters, and then the rectitude of things that came during the Zexal era, which was a lot, to be very fair. So, what is the precipice now in terms of Harpie? No support between releases. Reprints here and there, but only a few. I.e., Harpie Lady 1, who got reprinted in the first wave of Dual Terminal, and was the only Harpie monster in the Dual Terminal series to be printed. Then from there was just everything else following into it as either generic support for here and there situations, or having the utilities of tuner monsters to fill in the void in which was not ever filled in by the Harpie archetype. Because at that point in time, there are no Harpie tuners even till this day, despite the fact that we have at least one Synchro monster. But even in that Synchro monster, has conditions to where you don't have to necessarily use a tuner monster to synchro summon her. You can just use a generic Harpie monster with the proper levels to synchro into this monster and use the monster as a tuner. So yeah, that became a very prevalent thing, didn't it? So, with that in tow, from this point on, most of the decks in Harpies were relegated to either Harpie Lady 1, 3, Harpie Lady 1, Cyber Harpie, or the Vanilla Harpie Lady, which actually at this point, no one ran the Vanilla Harpie Lady. It was only Harpie Lady 1 and Cyber Harpie Lady, because they were the most conceptual monsters to play at that period of time. And then Harpie Queen, who was already now making herself a staple in the Harpie decks as a 3-of. Not only being able to search for Hunting Ground, but being a 19 beat stick that was also relegated to supporting the Harpie archetype. From there on, we now take a look at everything else that was pretty much relegated to the archetype in support. For the only release in the game for Harpies during 5Ds is Cyber Shield, which was a DM era equipped spell in the anime that was the only one of the equipped spells in the anime to finally get a physical print in the TCG. And I say TCG because the OCG had already had this card during the DM era as, I believe, a video game promo during that time. Cyber Shield effect is that it equips itself to only Harpie Lady or Harpie Lady sisters, and a monster gains 500 attack. This is aligned to Cyber Harpie Lady, who is an upgrade to Harpie Lady, who has a 500 additional more attack than the original Harpie Lady, because she is now wearing Cyber Shield. Which, yes, Cyber Shield has been edited for the good boys and girls who play Yu-Gi-Oh! Because in the OCG, those little circles right there that you see on Cyber Shield, those are actually spikes. And they were edited out so that they did not have the spikes on the breastplate that they did in the OCG. And it's funny enough because in the OCG, in the Bandai version of Yu-Gi-Oh!, Cyber Shield was already out as a set 4, and it was a different variation of points that it gave. It gave 800 attack to the monster it was equipped to, plus an additional 400 defense points. So, yeah, that was a thing. That was legitimately a thing. And it legitimately set at the precipice of why, wow, Konami, we know you really just do not like Harpies. So, moving on from Cyber Shield, let's talk about everything else that legitimately came out during the 5Ds era that were used in Harpie decks to try to keep them afloat. Were they considered meta? No. Will we love to consider them meta? We would. Because the only Harpie deck that we know during the 5Ds era that topped was a deck that utilized Skill Drain, Cyber Harpie Queen, Hunting Ground for removal, and then Banisher of Radiance to help deal with decks that fill with the graveyard. Oh, and our old boy, what is it? Beast King Barbaros, who I'm not talking about Beast King Barbaros in this video, because what is the point of talking about Beast King Barbaros? That was a one-off deck that literally did not have any more things included to it. Alright, first off are the Black Wings, a series of dark attribute winged beast monsters that supported the Harpie archetype in terms of a wave of using generic tuner, and a monster who came out later on in the precipice of being a way to bounce back cards to then help them be utilized once again. It's also set up for the field spell that we'll be talking about later on in the video. But for the most part, yeah, this is Blackwing, a series, an archetype that was introduced in the Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds era that predominantly took over the era for a good year, and even more so then because it was still one of the most dominating decks in the history of Winged Beast decks in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Franchise. Their ultimately big startup was Blackwing Gale the Whirlwind, Bora the Spear, and Sirocco the Dime, which I believe was all released during Cosmo Blazer. No, not Cosmo Blazer. That's a Zexal era. Jesus Christ. Raging Battle. There we go. Or was it Raging Battle? No, Crimson Crisis. Listen guys, it's been a minute. I had to talk about Blackwing, so forgive me. It was Crimson Crisis that started off the era of the Blackwing. Their duelist at hand is Crow Hogan, who was introduced as Yusei's friend from the Satellite, who was not only an exceptional duelist, but because of his deck being... But he was legitimately the Joey Wheeler of that franchise. Their original plans was to turn Crow into a Dark Signer and make his monsters basically have a Dark Synchro. But because of how much fan favorite the Blackwings became at that period of time, they changed the complete script and story of 5Ds, ultimately making Crow a Signer, and then later on making Leo, who was Luna's brother, who was supposed to be the Signer, become a Signer. So anyone who was questioning that, there's a whole history lesson on that already about, yes, that they were going to make Blackwings a one-off thing, but because a fan became a major hit for fans, they decided, okay, well, we're not going to dump this, we're just going to make this what it is now and have it focus on being a primary 3-of set situation. No, a primary setup for the Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds era. Which is not bad, because at least gave you a Winged Beast archetype to play around. And I think even then, it was really hard for Harpies now at that point, because the focus became Blackwing oriented, not Harpie oriented. From there on, there's a ton of Blackwings you could easily use, but the most profitable and most fashionable for Harpie decks were Blackwing Gale the Whirlwind and Zephyros the Elite. From there, we go on to the pure wind attributed archetype that came out during that era, and that is the Mist Valley, a series of wind attributed wingy beast monsters who were introduced during the Yu-Gi-Oh! 5D's era as part of the Dual Terminal series. For Cliff Notes, the Dual Terminal series introduced 6 different archetypes based off of attributes within the Yu-Gi-Oh! Franchise. For the water was the ice barrier. For the earth was the X-Sabers. For the dark was the ally of justice. For the fire were the flame veil. For the light attribute was the worms. And for the wind attribute are these guys, the Mist Valley. The Mist Valley are oriented as creatures who established their home in the Valley of Mist. And basically were the flyers, the soarers, the gatherers, all of that, and they loved their abilities of just being birds and being able to fly. There's also a taste to it because most of them do resemble the artwork of harpies themselves, as some of them have bird-like appendages, many of them have wings and even look more humanoid. Fun fact, we did get a glimpse of this back in the structure deck Lord of the Storm, as the Mist Valley Rock, Rock from the Valley of Haze, is actually just an adult version of this guy right here, Mist Valley Baby Rock. I am shocked that this monster did not get his name changed to Mist Valley Rock later on in the franchise, but because Mist Valley completely died off after the first 2 Hidden Arsenal sets, there was literally nothing else that could be done. Because they had already overstayed their welcome, in the story of Dual Terminal basically said, well, the Mist Valley kind of died out because they kind of got killed off on the sidelines, and most of their followings became newer archetypes of the wind attribute, and some even migrated into other attributed decks. There was really nothing else that could be done. We don't understand why Mist Valley has not gotten any support after the last 10 to 15 years since their release, but between them and Worms, there really hasn't been much else other in terms of upgrades or changes for Mist Valley. The Mist Valley monsters we have here are Mist Valley Baby Rock, Mist Valley Shaman, Mist Valley Soldier, and Mist Valley Falcon, within the span of at least 2 dual terminals and a couple of core sets releasing Mist Valley cards. Those are the only wave of Mist Valley cards that seem to be relevant. Low level tuners so that you can synchro in the stuff, like Ally Justice Catastor, or the TCG exclusive at the time, Vortex the Whirlwind. I'll talk about him soon. Mist Valley Shaman was a monster that allowed you to access level 7, such as Black Rose Dragon, in addition to that of Black Wingale the Whirlwind. Mist Valley Soldier allows you to get into your level 4, to your level 8 plays, making stuff like Stardust Dragon, Thought Ruler Archfiend, Red Dragon Archfiend. And Mist Valley Falcon, while being predominantly here as a beat stick for an additional 100 more attack points than Harpie Queen, this is probably just another additional monster just to play around with, especially with the continuous trap anti-spell fragrance, which don't worry, I'll talk about that too. But that is actually everything for the Mist Valley in terms of it, because I would talk about Apex Avian, but this is not the format to talk about Apex Avian in, because Apex Avian did not really help Harpies at all. There was too many just Appletoons for other better tuners. The next one up is Dragoonity, another Hidden Arsenal variant of support as well. This is Dragoonity Dark Spear. The Dragoonities were introduced at the second half of the third half of of the 5Ds era, because 5Ds went on for at least 3 years. I think that was probably the second longest in most cases between the concept of Yu-Gi-Oh! Introducing new mechanics to the extra decks and stuff. So Dragoonities were basically a series of wind attributed dragon and winged beast type monsters. Dragoonities themselves, while having some really good support cards, only really focused on them being Dragoonity, or Dragoonity insert type here. So for the most part, Dark Spear, a very low level tuner, could only be relegated to being used as, I'm going to tribute myself to summon a winged beast from the graveyard, just to be helpful. Other than that, if you're running multiples of me, you're only running me because you want a tuner out of me. Now, there are, of course, the other handful of other tuners that can be easily talked about within the franchise, in terms of talking about the Miss Valley, because, well, duh. I mean, about Harpie support there, because duh. There's, um, there's Phalanx, but Phalanx only really works if you have Ducks or Legionnaire, or you're going to be summoning something like Leviathan or Mistletoe, which case in points there. However, they're all relegated to Dragunities at that point, and even more so, Dragunity Harpie, while still being a thing, kind of didn't relegate a lot of support itself. Considering the fact that there were no reprints of Harpie cards in it, and Icarus Attack was definitely working overtime between Miss Valley, Dragunity, Blackwing, and Harpie. Next, in that sense, are all the generic cards that were introduced in terms of tuners, tuner support, and major things there. So here they are: Effect Veiler, Junk Synchron, um, Plex Better Zombie, Krebins, Psychic Commander because e-telling. We had a bit of the plants for the the engine that was plant engine, so that way you can have some more tuners and even utilize tokens to help you synchro summon as well, thanks to effects of Dandelion, Global Spore, and Lone Fire Blossom, which would have included them. Not enough room. We also have a couple of other OG generic support as well. Cyber Dragon to help you out with Machina. Summoner Monk, who is now getting introduced into this because Monk was definitely a outlet of discarding spells to then summon more of the Harpies to the field, or even getting cards like Miss Valley Soldier and then synchroing into stuff like Stardust Dragon. You'll see this more prevalent during the Zexal era and how Zexal really helped Summoner Monk become a good staple in Harpy. We also are going to introduce the Malefics into this, as Malefic Stardust Dragon protected your field spell from being destroyed by not only its own effect but other card effects. And if you wanted another beat stick, you had Cyber End Dragon, or Malefic Cyber End Dragon. You, of course, did have your hand traps of choice as well, as Gorus and Trag still kept things together. DD Crow still being a prominent source as well. I'm going to move this up just a bit because there are still a couple of more monsters to talk about in terms of relegated support that was not generic support, but just support there for Harpies. So Trag, Gorus being selective hand traps as well. And then we also have Dark Arm, who did keep up the whole precipice of, well, we're running all these dark monsters, why not throwing Dark Arm just to be another sequential setup card. We had the introduction of Maxi. Maxi becomes more prevalent in later years as a more permanent support card for the Yu-Gi-Oh franchise. Starting back when it was a secret rare in TCG exclusive for us here in the TCG from Storm of Ragnarok. Now, a couple of months later, we get introduced to Reborn Tengu, and Reborn Tengu is the start of Tengu format. This is a monster that says when it's removed from the field, you such summon another Reborn Tengu from your deck, ultimately being a source of tribute, synchro, just so many different things you could do with this guy, ultimately becoming Tengu plants towards the end of the 5Ds era and being a sequential part of multiple strategies at that point in time. Harpy just ended up using Reborn Tengu because it was just the easy floater. That's literally it. And just an easy monster to bring out as a beat stick. Now, I have set up the precipice for everything here, and I know some of you are probably asking about that one particular dark monster, and we're going to talk about that one particular dark monster right now. Dark Simorgh was introduced to the Yu-Gi-Oh franchise as a secret rare OCG import during Stardust Overdrive. This is a monster that is basically the dark counterpart of the wind attributed version, Simorgh the Bird of Divinity. Dark Simorgh is a level 7 wind attributed dark type monster, dark attributed winged beast type monster with 2700 attack and 1000 defense. While this card is in your graveyard, you can remove one dark and one wind monster from your hand to special summon it. If this card is in your hand, you can banish one wind and one dark from your graveyard to special summon it. While this card is placed upon the field, it is considered a wind attributed monster. And while this card remains face up on the field, your opponent cannot set cards, ultimately ending into the strategies in which we're subjected to as Simorgh Lock, where having Dark Simorgh on the field, and the continuous trap, anti-spell fragrance, made it prevalent for this deck to be ultimately a lockout deck, only circumventing your opponent to basically play cards that were basically either trap cards, which you couldn't set them because someone was on the field, and you were forced to not play your spells because of anti-spell fragrance. So in the combination of the game's history, this was probably one of the bigger lockdown decks that were created at the time. Funny enough, this same strategy was reintroduced decades later as part of the strategy for Flawanderies as another exceptional way of keeping your opponent from dealing with the flu engine while also having a bird that can easily be normal summoned through the game through the archetypes mechanics. But that's for a different video. Outside of that, this is where anti-spell fragrance became more of a staple in Harpie decks to support the locking out of your opponent's spell and trap cards. Well, locking your opponent out of their spell cards and blowing them up with your Harpies, while also utilizing Mist Valley support to bounce them back to then be able to drop them again. As well as card combos like Icarus Attack, Hysteric Party, and then on and so forth. So I did at least bring to that, and I also should mention about my most creative deck during that time, which I still, even to this day, regret. A combination of Blackwings and Harpies to focus around summoning Dark Simorgh, which I like to call BWHP, which was Harpie and Blackwing. Do not ask me about the acronyms because, of course, the acronym should have been BWHL, but I didn't really care that much. So, yeah, alright, we have at least talked about Simorgh. Let's talk about every Synchro monster and every extra deck card that can be potentially used in a Harpie deck during this period of time. We have Chimera Tech Fortress Dragon to deal with the machines. We had Cyber End Dragon to banish for Malefic Cyber End. If you had the access of tuners, you were able to use cards like Ally of Justice Catastor, and the ever-mentioned monster of, hold on, I know where he is, there it is, Vortex the Whirlwind, the TCG exclusive and the promo card for Storm of Ragnarok. Requires one tuner and one or more non-tuner Wingy Beast monsters. When this card is destroyed by battle and sent to your graveyard, you can special summon one level 4 or lower Wingy Beast type monster from your deck. A Synchro who was basically playing off of its factors of being a support card for an archetype that did not need it to be a Synchro monster, let alone us playing around with level 1 tuners. But then we had Glowbulb and Spore, so people were like, well, you can't complain too much. I was like, yeah, no, even Blackwings don't use this. Because they don't. Magical Android, Life Point Game, and then we move on into the level 6s. Yugioh Guardian was a staple back then until its banning. Generic monsters with more access because Yugioh Guardian was expensive are Gaia the Dragon Knight, Gaia Knight the Force of the Earth was a synchro version of Gaia. Fanville Uraquasis from the Hidden Arsenal, as well as Bryonic, one of the most expensive of the Hidden Arsenal cards until Trishula's release. And then, for the most part, one of the most generically used ones because, well, bounce all those cards back by discarding your entire hand. It'll help you win the game. Ancient Fairy Dragon to blow us field spells to then go get your own field spell or special summon your own level 4 or lower monsters, but you could not conduct battle phase that turn, which is perfectly fine because you can saying that for other things. Black Rose Dragon to nuke the field, and then her are the level 8s and 9s. Oh, I'm sorry, I am forgetting a couple more. We have Psychic Life Chancer, which is a generic synchro. We have the Blackwing synchro monsters because we did have Gale the Whirlwind. It is not Gale Vayu, but then why are you running Vayu in the deck? But if you're playing Blackwing and Harpie like I did, and we're mashing two archetypes that should not have been mashed that well together, Ironwing, Armor Master, and Silver Wind the Ascendant. Alright, moving into that are all the level 8s. Colossal Fighter, Stardust Dragon, Red Dragon Archfiend, Thought Royal Archfiend. And then, oh, Scrap Dragon. And then, like, Miss Worm and Trishula, because extra that. Now, in addition to those things, we are now moving into a couple of more staples into the franchise at that point, but mostly relegated to just spell cards. Divine Wind of the Mist Valley, the field spell for the Mist Valley monsters. Return when a wind monster is returned to your hand that you control. You can special summon one level 4 or lower wind attribute monster from your deck. This did not get more providence till Harpie Dancer's release back in 2013. Swallow's Nest, to switch out your monsters, your Winged Beast monsters for other Winged Beast monsters, ultimately playing into filling out the graveyard for some more, but more so of tagging out Harpies to tag in Black Wings, Miss Valley are stronger monsters of the Winged Beast archetype. Burial to help out some more. Zone as one of the many few cards to pop to retrieve your field spell. Magic Planner to send off your own continuous spell trap cards so that you can draw cards, primarily sending off anti-spell fragments. Instant Fusion, and I feel like this Instant Fusion does not deserve to be here. But there were a couple of low-level monsters you could easily break into. But you know what, I'll be very honest with you, Instant Fusion feels like more of an Xyz era type of thing. I'll come back to this card once again once we talk about the Zexal era. Solemn Warning being one of the multiple solemn cards and counter traps that can be used at this period of time. And Eradicator and Deck Devi, only because, well, we were playing all these dark monsters, so why not get a hands of them? Alright, so, for the most part, yeah, that is Harpie in a nutshell during this era. If there's anything else I could additionally include in this, is that this was probably one of the most difficult eras of Yu-Gi-Oh! To play a Harpie deck at its period of time, with little to no support and having to rely on other Winged Beast archetypes and other Winged Beast support to really precipice itself. Most RP players don't like to play in Edison, and I know some really do try. Where are my Harpies? Jesus Christ, I already moved them somewhere? Oh, here they go. So, it kind of was just a precipice even for me at that point, where I ended up having to switch decks over, because as much as I love playing Harpie, Harpie was just not it during this format. It really wasn't. Like, if you're playing during Edison, going to a lot of things for, like, Edison reaching into the beginning stages that were Tengu, I would suggest don't play Harpie. And if you are, I pray for you, because you're basically going to have to use subsequential cards to supplement things. And I'm not hating on Miss Valley, I'm not hating on Blackwing. It was just Konami was not giving us support, and it kind of just was like, yeah, meta, who are you? Harpie, stay out. So that is Act 3 of the videos. Now I am only going to relegate into the next wave of things being Tengu format in the first half of Zexal era, because why not? I don't really have a time period in which I'm going to drop that video, but I will just say this, stay tuned for it. But I'm going to give myself some time right now to focus on me and try to enjoy the rest of my vacation. So, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoy it. I'm not time-stamping this. You guys are on your own on that one. But if you want to time-stamp it, there's the comment section. Go ahead and time-stamp it. Other than that, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys in another video. HTJ, signing out. Bye-bye.